Hello and welcome. I'm Anastasia, and this is a quiet little corner of the world where your thoughts can slow down, your breath can soften, and your beautiful mind can rest. Anastasia's Whisper. I'm so glad you're here. Tonight's sleep story was made to help you drift off with a smile and to remind you that it's okay not to have everything figured out. Because the truth is, no one really ever has. In this story, the greatest mistakes in human history that we just rolled with will explore the moments when humans truly messed up and somehow made it part of the plan. You'll hear about the time we declared war on emus and lost. You'll float past a spacecraft lost to a simple math error. And you'll discover that the nuclear launch code was once just 8 zeros for 20 years. This story is here to help you let go, to feel lighter, and to know that whatever you forgot, fumbled, or overthought today, you're doing just fine. So snuggle in, get cozy, and let history's most ridiculous mistakes rock you gently to sleep. Let's begin. Australia, 1932. Soldiers have returned from World War I. They're back home, back on government farmland, trying to build peaceful lives. But there's one problem. Actually, there are 20,000 problems. And they're emus. Now, if you've never stood near an emu, imagine a large, suspicious ostrich with zero chill. They're 6 feet tall, built like linebackers, and can sprint faster than your Wi-Fi. These feathered giants had migrated into farmland, eating crops, trampling fences, and generally disrespecting boundaries in the way only Australian wildlife can. The farmers begged the government for help, and the government, in a moment of dazzling confidence, sent in the military. With machine guns, yes, a literal war, against emus. Now, what followed was one of the most unintentionally hilarious military operations in history. The soldiers fired at the emus and missed, or hit one, and the rest escaped like feathery ghosts. The birds traveled in coordinated units, flanking fields, dodging bullets, and reappearing behind enemy lines like they had an actual strategy. At one point, the army tried to mount a machine gun on a truck, but the terrain was too rough. The gun jammed. The emus vanished. After weeks of embarrassment, thousands of wasted bullets, and fewer than 1,000 confirmed bird casualties, Australia surrendered to birds. The emus had won the war, and yes, that actually happened. So tonight, if you feel like you're being outpaced by your inbox, or your to-do list is running circles around you, just remember, even trained soldiers lost to a squad of birds in 1932, and we just kind of accepted it. Let's set the scene. It's the late 1990s. NASA is preparing to explore Mars with the kind of high-tech enthusiasm only a multi-billion-dollar space agency can summon. The mission? The Mars Climate Orbiter. This sleek little spacecraft was built to study Martian weather and atmosphere. And it was expensive. We're talking $327 million expensive. Custom instruments, fancy computers, NASA stickers, the works. Everything was going great. It launched smoothly. No explosions. Everyone clapped. And then, 9 months later, as the orbiter was preparing to enter Mars's orbit. Something went wrong. Very wrong. The orbiter began descending too fast, too low, too aggressively, and then nothing. No signal, no orbit, just silence. NASA's team stared at the data, confused and increasingly horrified, and eventually, painfully, they discovered the mistake. 2 teams were involved in the orbiter's navigation. One used the metric system. The other used imperial units. No one converted anything. That's right. They sent a spacecraft 416 million miles through space and forgot to multiply by 1.609. Because one team thought the force was in pound seconds, and the other thought it was in Newton seconds, which is basically the math version of baking a cake at 500 degrees Fahrenheit when the recipe said Celsius. The result? The orbiter came in way too fast, skimmed the Martian atmosphere like a doomed frisbee, and either disintegrated or yeeted itself into deep space. We still don't know exactly what happened. NASA issued a statement calling it a navigation error due to unit inconsistency, which is a polite way of saying we accidentally exploded $327 million because someone didn't press the math button. And the best part? This wasn't the first time imperial versus metric confusion caused chaos. It's just the most beautifully expensive example. So tonight, if you ever feel like you've made a costly mistake, if you sent the wrong file, forgot the attachment, or told someone no worries, when you meant deep emotional wounds were inflicted, remember the Mars Climate Orbiter. A literal space mission was lost because someone forgot to convert inches to centimeters, and everyone just kept going. The year is 1919. The place? Boston. The weather? Cold. The streets? About to get very weird. In the north end of the city stood a massive steel tank, 50 feet tall, 90 feet wide, filled with 2.3 million gallons of molasses. It was owned by the Purity Distilling Company, which sounds lovely until you realize their quality control department was apparently non-existent. The tank had always been a little sketchy. Locals reported strange creaking sounds. The seams leaked regularly. One employee painted it brown to hide the drips instead of, fixing it. And then one unusually warm January day, the molasses inside expanded. The tank, pushed to its sugary limit, burst. And what followed was a wave of thick, hot molasses, 25 feet high, moving at 35 miles per hour, surging through the streets like a slow-motion tsunami of doom. Horses were knocked over, buildings collapsed, trains derailed. People were literally trapped in syrup. It was like a dessert-themed horror movie. The sound was so loud people thought it was a bomb. And the cleanup took weeks. Molasses stuck to everything: buildings, shoes, mustaches, souls. The entire harbor reportedly smelled like sugar for months. Even in July, people said they could still taste it in the air. 21 people died. 150 more were injured. And the Purity Distilling Company spent years paying for damages, while everyone else tried to figure out how on earth this had actually happened. Eventually, the flood led to stricter construction regulations in the U.S., which is good because it turns out try not to explode your molasses tank really should have been a building code all along. So tonight, If you feel overwhelmed, if something in your life feels like it's moving too slowly or too stickily, take comfort in the fact that you are not being chased by a dessert. You are safe, you are horizontal, and your home is molasses free. Probably. Now, as the syrup settles, let's glide from sticky disasters to delicious revenge, because our next story involves a potato, a chef, and one very petty act that changed snack history forever. It's the summer of 1853 in Saratoga Springs, New York. At a fancy resort called Moon's Lake House, a man sits down to dine. He's wealthy, he's particular, and he has very strong feelings about his French fries. He sends them back, too thick, not crispy enough, unsatisfactory. So the chef, George Crumb, a man of culinary talent and absolutely zero patience, decides to teach this man a lesson. He slices the potatoes paper thin, fries them until they're crisp like autumn leaves, and drowns them in salt. The idea? Make them so unappetizing, so loud, so extra, that the guest will regret ever complaining. And then the guest loves them, like really loves them. He calls them the best thing he's ever tasted. He asks for more. Word spreads. Other guests start requesting Crumb's chips. Within weeks, they're a hit. Within years, they're a nationwide obsession. And today, potato chips are a multi-billion-dollar industry, born out of a fit of kitchen rage. Now, there's some debate among historians about whether this exact story is 100% accurate, but it's widely believed that spite absolutely played a role in the chips' rise. Because if there's one universal truth, it's this: petty people are often great innovators, and sometimes frustration makes the best seasoning. So if you've ever written an angry email, deleted it, then made a beautiful spreadsheet out of sheer vengeance, congratulations. You're part of a long and salty legacy. Now, as the crunch fades and the fryer cools, we move on to another snack-related blunder, one that began as medicine and ended as the most addictive soda on earth. Next up, the invention of Coca-Cola, which started with cocaine, nerves, and a very ambitious pharmacist. Picture it. Atlanta, Georgia, 1886. The heat is sticky, people are tired, and John Pemberton, a Civil War veteran turned pharmacist, is tinkering in his lab with a simple mission: create a miracle drink, one that cures headaches, soothes nerves, maybe makes you a little bit more socially acceptable on a bad day. What he came up with was a syrup, a thick, brown, sweet mixture he believed would be the next great tonic for exhaustion and anxiety. And it kind of was, because the original Coca-Cola contained cocaine. Yes, the real thing, straight from coca leaves, right there on the ingredient list. But wait, it gets better. The formula also included caffeine, extracted from cola nuts, hence the name Coca-Cola. A double whammy of pick-me-up ingredients, mixed with sugar and secret flavorings, sold as a nerve tonic in pharmacies for 5 cents a glass. People loved it. They felt energized, focused, very chatty. Doctors prescribed it. Barbershops served it. Church ladies probably sipped it before choir practice and wondered why their altos were so enthusiastic. Pemberton, bless him, had no idea he'd invented the prototype for modern brand loyalty. And over time, as the product spread and grew, someone, probably during a board meeting with a nervous cough, said, maybe we should take out the actual cocaine. So they did, slowly, quietly, over several years. By the 1920s, Coca-Cola was Coke-free, but the brand had already become a global sensation. And today, you can find it everywhere, from backyard barbecues to vending machines in the middle of the Sahara. All thanks to a nervous pharmacist, a glass of syrup, and a questionable understanding of what calm actually means. So tonight, if your bedtime routine involves staring at the ceiling and wondering why your brain still feels caffeinated at 1 a.m., just be glad you didn't accidentally drink a nerve tonic from 1886. You are resting. You are not vibrating from vintage pharmaceuticals. And that, dear listener, is progress. Now let's ease into something even stranger. A mistake so bold, it bent, literally. Next up, the famous Italian tower that was never supposed to lean, and why nobody ever tried to fix it. Welcome to Pisa, Italy. The year is 1173. The Renaissance hasn't arrived yet. Plumbing is still a suggestion. But the citizens of Pisa, they're feeling ambitious. They decide to build a bell tower, a grand shining marble structure that would complete their cathedral complex and make rival cities jealous. They hire architects. They draw up blueprints. The mood is pure confidence. There's just one small problem. They build it on mud. More precisely, on a layer of soft, squishy, unstable soil, which is not ideal when you're constructing an 8-story, stone-heavy tower. But nobody realizes this right away. They get through the second floor when someone looks up and says, "Is it supposed to tilt like that?" And sure enough, the tower had started to lean. Now any reasonable person might say, let's pause, let's rethink, let's not create a marble Jenga tower of doom. But Pisa? Pisa said, let's wait, and just keep going. Construction was halted, then resumed, then halted again. This went on for nearly 200 years. Each new architect tried to correct the lean. One angled the next few floors in the opposite direction to compensate. Another tried building one side taller than the other. The result? A tower that doesn't just lean. It curves like a confused question mark. But here's the twist. People loved it. Travelers came from all over to see it. Artists painted it. Poets wrote about it. And Pisa, wisely, leaned into the lean. Over time, engineers added reinforcements to make sure it wouldn't collapse. They anchored the base, shifted weight, stabilized it just enough to keep it safe. And today, the Leaning Tower of Pisa is one of the most photographed landmarks on Earth, thanks to its charming, permanent, very unintentional oops. So if you've ever made a mistake you couldn't undo, if something you built turned out crooked and weird and nothing like the Pinterest version, know this: they built a bell tower wrong, left it crooked, and it became famous. And if Pisa can roll with it, so can you. Now, let's drift a little further into architectural irony, because coming up next, we visit a monument that was supposed to be temporary, but never got taken down. Yes, it's time for the Eiffel Tower's accidental forever job. Paris, 1887. The City of Light is preparing for the 1889 World's Fair, a huge international event celebrating industry, innovation, and the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution. To impress the world, engineers propose a bold idea, a giant iron tower, 300 meters tall. It'll be the tallest structure in the world, a shining symbol of French genius and temporary enthusiasm. The project is awarded to Gustave Eiffel, an engineer best known for his work on bridges and being unreasonably good at building very tall things. He's told this tower will stand for 20 years, just long enough to dazzle the crowds, maybe scare a few pigeons, and then get quietly dismantled. But before it's even finished, people are furious. Writers, artists, and architects across Paris absolutely hate the design. They call it a monstrous iron skeleton, a tragic lamppost, and a disgrace to French taste. One famous author said it looked like a factory chimney that escaped. Despite the backlash, the tower opens in 1889, and to everyone's surprise, it's a hit. People line up to ride the elevator. Tourists flood in. Suddenly this ugly iron thing is printing money. But the lease still says, take it down by 1909. So how did it survive? Wireless telegraphs. By the early 1900s, the military realized the tower's incredible height made it the perfect radio antenna. It could intercept messages, send Morse code, and do very spy-like things. The Eiffel Tower became too useful to demolish. It was extended, reinforced, and eventually accepted by the public, not just as a piece of engineering, but as a beloved symbol of Paris. Today, it's one of the most visited landmarks in the world, all because a War Department said, actually, this is kind of handy. So if you've ever created something you thought was temporary, a project, a post, a hairstyle, and watched it take on a life of its own, you're in Eiffel Tower territory. Sometimes the thing you build out of obligation becomes the thing people love the most. Now, as we climb gently back down from the skyline, let's return to Earth, to a moment in American history when the military made a decision so strange it involved training a cat to be a spy. Yes, you read that right. It's the 1960s. The Cold War is colder than ever, and the CIA is deep into its "what if we did something completely bonkers for intelligence" era. In an underground room that probably smelled like coffee and paranoia, someone at a meeting said, "What if we trained a cat to spy on the Soviets?" Now, to be clear, this was not a joke. It became a real classified program known as Acoustic Kitty. And it was exactly what it sounds like. The CIA took an ordinary house cat, soft, furry, possibly a menace to furniture, and surgically implanted a microphone in its ear, a transmitter in its rib cage, and an antenna in its tail. Yes, they turned a cat into a walking recording device. The theory was that cats, being naturally stealthy and non-suspicious, could slip past guards and curl up near Soviet operatives, collecting priceless intel in the most purring, pouncing way imaginable. After months of training, which we can only assume involved a lot of treats and very confused vets, the CIA deployed their first spy cat near the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., It was showtime. They opened the van door. The cat stepped out and was immediately hit by a taxi. Mission over. Millions of dollars gone. Cat, unfazed by international tension. The CIA pulled the plug on the program shortly after, having learned a very expensive lesson about cat priorities. Because as anyone who's ever lived with a feline knows, you can try to train them, but ultimately, the cat is in charge. And in this case, the cat wasn't interested in foreign policy. So tonight, if you feel like you're failing at multitasking, or your big idea didn't go as planned, or your best-laid plan just curled up and walked into traffic, please know, even the CIA once pinned their hopes on a cat with a wire in its tail. And they moved on, and so can you. Now, as our feline operative fades into the archives, let's tiptoe into something a little sweeter. Because our next story is about a strange day in Olympic history, when marathon runners were collapsing, cheating, and possibly poisoned. And the officials just said, "Hey, give him a medal anyway." Welcome to St. Louis, Missouri, 1904. The third modern Olympic Games are underway. The excitement is high. The sportsmanship? Debatable. And then there's the marathon. It was hot. Very hot. Temperatures soared to 32 degrees Celsius, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and the marathon route was a dusty, unpaved nightmare filled with hills, choking humidity, and almost no water. That's right. Race organizers decided that only one water station was necessary, at mile 11, because they were experimenting with purposeful dehydration. A bold choice, an incredibly bad one. The chaos began immediately. One runner, a South African named Len Townyan, was chased off course by a pack of wild dogs. Another runner, John Lorden, started vomiting after mile 2 and simply exited the race. And then there was Fred Lors. Fred, overheated and exhausted, dropped out after 9 miles. His trainers picked him up in a car and drove him the rest of the way. Fred later jogged across the finish line, smiling and waving like nothing happened. For a few minutes he was declared the winner, until someone pointed out that he had literally been chauffeured. Fred claimed it was a joke. The officials were not amused. He was disqualified. But the real star of this glorious disaster was Thomas Hicks. Hicks started strong but began to suffer under the heat. His trainers, ever helpful, gave him a stimulating tonic, which included egg whites, brandy, and strychnine. Yes, strychnine, a literal poison, commonly used to kill rats. They believed small doses would boost performance. Spoiler, it did not. Hicks staggered through the rest of the race, hallucinating, mumbling, and turning the color of bad decisions. He had to be physically carried across the finish line, legs barely functioning, and then was declared the official winner. That's right. He was drugged, almost dead, and held up like a marionette, and still got a gold medal. Honestly, iconic. The whole event was such a disaster that the marathon nearly got removed from future Olympics. Instead, it stayed, but with better rules, like no poison and maybe 2 water stops. So if today felt like a struggle, if you barely made it through your to-do list and collapsed into bed like a confused 1904 runner on a bad brunch cocktail, congratulations. You survived, and you didn't even need strychnine. Now, as we approach our final turn in this marathon of mistakes, let's end with one of the most oddly comforting facts in modern history. For 2 decades, the launch code for all U.S. nuclear missiles was literally 8 zeros. Let's time travel to the Cold War, the 1960s. The tension, high. The stakes, existential. The mood, extremely paranoid. This was the era of underground bunkers, war games, and just-in-case missile silos hidden beneath American soil, all connected to an elaborate launch system designed to prevent impulsive chaos. In theory. But for nearly 20 years, from 1962 to 1977, the U.S. military used the same launch code for all nuclear missiles. And that code was 0. 8 zeros. No symbols, no letters, no security questions about your childhood pet. Just the digital equivalent of a door labeled "Do Not Enter" that swings wide open when you breathe on it. Why? Because higher-ups worried that if there was an actual emergency, like nuclear war, the launch teams wouldn't have time to remember complicated codes. So instead of training or better systems, they just made the password so simple that no one could possibly forget it, including, the enemy. If they found the right paperwork, this code was installed into something called the Permissive Action Link, PAL, the system designed to prevent unauthorized launches, except it wasn't really preventing anything. The military quietly kept this setup in place for almost 2 decades. It wasn't declassified until years later, when historians and security experts collectively said, "I'm sorry. What?" Even today, it's hard to believe that global annihilation was one tiny keypad away from an octuple 0. The upside? It never got used. Despite the tension, the drills, and the miscommunications, of which there were many, the system never failed catastrophically. The world did not end due to a bad password. So if you've ever reused the same password for 5 different websites or typed 1234 into your phone and felt a little bit guilty, you're still ahead of 1960s nuclear command. And that, dear dreamer, is the perfect place to rest. Tonight, you've wandered through Molasses floods, metric meltdowns, bird wars, and spy cats. You've learned that mistakes, even huge ones, don't always mean failure. Sometimes they mean snacks, or landmarks, or worldwide brands. Sometimes they mean stories. So breathe. You don't have to be perfect. You're already doing better than people who put microphones in kittens and launch satellites with the wrong ruler. You are warm. You are safe. And history? Well, it's full of humans just like you, messy, hopeful, and still rolling with it. Good night, lovely mind. You made it.